Hello! So, as you most likely know, I am currently working on this, and I just finished doing the bodice for this, the under bodice, under corset, whatever you want to call it. That video I'll put up in the cards, I'll put down below. And next I am working on the understructure, because a skirt like this needs to have the proper foundation to hold its shape and the weight of all of this velvet and embroidery that I'm going to be putting on top of it. So that's what this video is today. I'll be going over the crinoline, how I made my own custom crinoline and put that together for this build. My own pattern, which is also the first time ever digitized a pattern, so I'm very excited to show you that. And if I can finalize those files, I will be posting them somewhere to share with you all. So this is my path to crown, by the way. I'm really excited to try and get into the Cosplay Crown Championships and see if I can maybe place regionally and work my way through the circuit, and this is the build that I chose. I'm not going to explain that in every video because I've explained it a lot, but just know this is a competition piece. It's meant to be for a very difficult contest, so the stakes are high. If you want to watch my Path to Crown series, make sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button. There are two types of videos I do on my channel. One is the chatty update type, which is typically posted weekly. That sort of gives you my thought process for how I'm tackling the project, how far I've come that week, how far I plan to go the next week. And then I post videos like this one that shows you my start to finish process, how I made it. You can actually see me construct things. So there's two different types of videos I typically post on this channel. And since I powered my way through finishing this crinoline, this video is going up instead of a weekly update. So the next part will be to mock up the skirt, and I do have to order more fabric and supplies for that. So my video next week will probably just be my normal update, but I hope you enjoy this. If this is something you like, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to comment down below, and I guess with that, let's hop on into it. So to make this crinoline, I need about 8 vertical ribbons attached to a belt and what is called a bag, which contains multiple boning channels at the bottom. And I estimate that there will be about 4 or 5 boning channels in the bag, and 7 or so boning channels that go through the vertical ribbons. I made my first printable sewing pattern, and I am going to test it today. It is super simple. It's just a rectangle, but it has the stitch lines for the boning channel of the bag, and it has all the other information that you need to make the hoop skirt. So this part is just the bottom of the skirt. I still need to make the pattern for the boning channels and the dimensions. So I'm working on taping this pattern together. All I need to do once it is assembled is cut around this dark line. The line on the inside is my seam allowance, and the dashed lines are for my boning channels. So after I cut out my paper pattern, I then transferred it over to my fabric. This is a mid-weight cotton twill with no stretch, which is really good for things like this that need to be durable. I cut out one full-length pattern piece on the fold, and then I folded the pattern in half at the fold line that I marked and cut out a piece which is smaller than the first one. So you have one long piece and one small piece. And I sewed these two pieces together at the short side, making one long rectangle, but I did not sew the other end because I do not want this to be a circle just yet. I folded the bag in half long ways with the right sides together and pinned in place. Then I made a mark 6 inches in from the left side of the rectangle and then 6 inches in from the right side of the open rectangle. I sewed the top edge of the bag together, starting at one of those marks that I just made and ending at the other mark. This makes one long tube with the last 6 inches on each side open. After turning the bag right side out, I arranged it so that the seam was in the middle of the back tube and ironed this seam flat. And then I transferred the boning channel markings from the pattern piece onto the bag, pinned the open edges of the rectangle together, and sewed at the side seam, creating a complete circle with an opening at that center long seam that I created from not stitching the last 6 inches together in a previous step. After this, I stitched along the markings on the bag to create the boning channels. The next step was to mark the vertical ribbon placement. Starting with the seam in the center of the bag, I marked 8.75 inches to the right and 8.75 inches to the left of this seam at the very top of the bag. Then I marked every 17.25 inches from those marks all the way around the bag, creating in total 8 marks for the 8 vertical ribbon. So to make the vertical ribbons, I cut out 8 pieces of Grosgrain ribbon at about 104 inches in length, and then I folded them in half so that they were 52 inches in length. I marked along the length of the ribbon to show my stitch lines to create channels that the hoop boning will go through. I don't remember my measurements here, but I did create a pattern for this specific part so that I knew that the hoops were going to be evenly spaced. And then I pinned the ribbon together so that I could then take it to my sewing machine and stitch along each of these marks. At the very end, I folded the raw edges of the ribbon in about 1/2 inch and stitched to hide the raw edges. Next, I went along the bag and pinned the ribbons in place, centering them on those marks that I made at the top of the bag earlier. Once that's all stitched together, I took a belt that I originally was planning to use for the waist and slid it through the open loops at the top of the ribbons. I wound up not using the belt in the end, but I will get to that later. Then I was able to hang this on the mannequin and start working on the rest of the boning. So I did a lot of mathing to try and figure out the shape of the boning, including putting it in Illustrator and drawing out the shape that I wanted. And I tested the bottom boning piece out with heavy duty zip ties and measured and cut it out of this boning here. It wound up being too short, so I gave up on testing it and just started to slide the boning directly into the bag and the open hoops to try and get the right length. This actually worked a lot better than trying to math it out, because then I was able to play around with the shape a little bit and get my hoops exactly how I want them. To cut down my boning to size, and I made sure to leave the top 2 bones open in the front. This allows me to be able to get into the crinoline a lot easier. I'm also able to sit down a little easier because of this, and it keeps the bodice from being pushed out in a very unflattering way. Once I had the boning where I wanted it, I wrapped some pre-made boning casing from corset making supplies around the bones just to get the measurement, and then cut that to size. So I wanted to recycle the petticoat that I made for Scarlett O'Hara, since Scarlett O'Hara will not be competing anymore. Luckily, it does fit over this, so I don't need to remake it. I may need to lengthen it just a smidge though. Once I had the boning casing cut, I had to slide the boning into the casing. I capped the top 2 bones and slid them through the opening in the vertical ribbons. I did this for all of them, and once they were in place, I pinned them to the vertical ribbon and then went around and hand stitched them in place so that nothing would slide around. Because the boning casing was just slightly too small for this boning, the connectors that I had purchased and really like to use do not fit in the casing. So I had to cut open the casing around this area and hand stitch in some covers. To help secure the connectors in place, I did add a little tape on either end. This weirdly works. You'd think that tape would fail, but I have had no problems doing it this way. And then I just took little pieces of boning casing and stitched them to the front and back to hide the connector gap. And next, I decided not to use the belting. It was just too thick to wear under the bodice, so I went ahead and created a waistband just by cutting out a rectangle that was about 3 inches smaller than my waist size in the corset that I planned to wear with this. I sewed it together to create a tube, ironed it flat, and then I went ahead and used some eyelets that I have been holding on to forever to make it a lace up in the front. So I did go around and hand sew in all of the ribbons to the waistband. Should these have been sandwiched into the waistband so you couldn't see them and they didn't need to be hand sewed? Yes, but I did not think about that until I was in the process of hand sewing them to the waistband. So I am nearly complete. I am still waiting on the boning caps for the second hoop. I ordered it from Amazon and it keeps getting pushed back. I have no idea when it will be here. Also still waiting on the additional boning. I need to finish out the bag. That is part of the same Amazon order, so who knows when it will get here. But once I have that, I will put the boning in and then hand stitch that open and closed. So trying this on, even though it's technically unfinished, I'm still really happy with how the waistband turned out. I'm happy with the fit and I'm happy with the movement. So I think this crinoline I'm going to call like 99% done, because I still need that stuff to come from Amazon before I can finish it off. But I'm happy to also say that the petticoat fits wonderfully around this, so now I can move on to mocking up the skirt. So I'm super excited that that turned out and that my petticoat worked over it. So now I'm on to mocking up the skirt, which I've already started. So I'm very excited to keep this build going. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and I'm a little scared that it's going so fast. It looks like, according to my planner, I could potentially have all of the base structure completed by the end of October and then move on to all of the detail work and leather work, which I think is going to take me a while. But I do have a trip coming up in a couple of weeks to St. Louis, so that may sort of put a little hindrance on this. And of course, if I can't pull off the base skirt quickly, that will also slow me down. I forgot that there was a lot of hand sewing that's going to be involved in that. I do still need to do the little bits of finishing on this crinoline, still waiting for my order, but when that gets here, I will finish that up as well. So with that, I hope you enjoy. If you have any questions or comments, post them down below. I'm pretty responsive, and subscribe if you feel like it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!